I want to do a fairly brief lesson on every type of alternate bass note you can do over our primary chords, major, minor, dominant 7, things like that. Another name for alternate bass notes is chord inversions. I'm going to show you how these are used when writing chord changes, and I want to demonstrate the startling effect they have on, spicing up a chord progression or adding variation and nuance or harmonic sophistication to what might otherwise be, a boring chord sequence. I'll use real-world examples to show you how they work in a song, and you may be surprised to find out that these alternate bass notes are already in your musical brain whether you know it or not, because we've been listening to them all our lives in different pieces of classical music, certain pieces of pop music. It's like D over C or a D7 with C in the bass. You're like, dude, that's that sound. That's the thing. I've been listening to it all my life. Every time it gets there in the song, I'm like, yo, what is that? And then now there it is. That's a D with a C in the bass, or the minor 7 in the bass. What I'm telling you is you're going to start to be able to associate the sounds of these alternate bass notes with things you're actually hearing. So stay tuned. What are alternate bass notes or chord inversions, and why do we use them? Well, put simply, alternate bass notes, chord inversions, are when you put any other note in the bass other than the root. If we have a C major chord, the root is C. And if we want to do different inversions, we have to put different notes in the bass. And not every note works, only certain notes work, and they have different functions. So if we have a C major triad spelled C, E, G, most modern bands would simply put C in the bass. That's called C root inversion. Since the C major chord is spelled C, E, G, if we put the next note in the bass, it would be the E, or the major third, and that would be called C major first inversion, or simply written as a slash chord, C over E, and has a very different sound. So this was C with C in the bass. Now if that E goes in the bass, listen to how the sound changes. How many times in the 80s did that want to pull up to that, Yeah, there's a weird quality, we'll go over it later, of a major third in the bass. So we have C major, and then the major third of E in the bass. So that's called C major first inversion. If we put the next note of that C major chord in the bass, that would be G, because it's spelled C, E, G. That is called C major second inversion, or the slash chord would be called C over G. The second inversion, or perfect fifth, in the bass is the second most stable sound you can have after the root. Obviously the root is the most stable, but the second most stable, because we had heard that major third, right? That's not super stable. That wants to pull somewhere. So when we put that perfect fifth in the bass, that is the next most stable sound we can have after the root. So C over C major with C in the bass, or root inversion, is the most stable sound, and then C over G would be the next most viable stable bass note. That's a C major second inversion. As far as slash chords versus inversions, I like doing slash chords. If we're reading, a jazz chart, it's going to be, C over G or D over C or whatever, but you can just put the slash chord there and musicians reading chords can understand it. I don't really need to be like, play the second inversion of this. So mostly what I'll be doing in this video is referring to them as slash chords. Just so you know, most rock and pop bands use few to no slash chords in their music. Once in a while they stumble upon one, like that classic, 80s climb down when you go G, F sharp, E, but you do G major, D over F sharp. There's that third in the bass. We've all heard that before, right? They'll stumble upon a bass note here or there, but they rarely elevate their compositions by really infusing a few cool bass notes in there or making a melody with the bass. I hate having to advertise to you, so let me make this quick. I could really use your help to grow this channel. Between my full-time job as an ER nurse and being a husband and father of 2 kids, it's very hard for me to find the time to make content for this channel. Many of my videos take 10 or 20 hours to create. For those of you who are really getting a lot out of my lessons, here is how you can help me out. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and that the notification bell is set to all notifications for my channel. I think only 10% of you have that clicked now. You can watch more of my videos by browsing through the playlist section of my channel to find the videos videos that most interest you. But the very best way you can help me is to subscribe to my Patreon music school called High Castle Conservatory. YouTube pays me about 1 cent per view, but on Patreon you can decide to give me $3.50 a month, or $7, or $15, or more, whatever you feel you're getting out of my lessons. The more support that I get on Patreon, the more time I have to devote to making unique music education content for you. At this point, I have not abbreviated my videos here on YouTube or put my full videos behind a paywall, and by joining my Patreon, you help me in the most direct way possible. If you have found yourself really enjoying my lessons, then please come join High Castle Conservatory on Patreon. Lastly, please consider buying my original music projects I.S.S. and High Castle Tele Orchestra on Bandcamp. You can find the details and links in the description below. Now let's get back to that lesson. Classical music uses these inversions or alternate bass notes quite frequently. With jazz, it is hard to tell, since most jazz bass lines are not stationary. They're repetitive, and improvisation is such a big component of that jazz walking bass line that most jazz charts that I have read don't have a lot of slash chords. Once in a while, they'll put one in there. Usually in jazz, what the bass player is doing on any given tune is not super clear. It's just holding down this foundational element. So let's just say slash chords are not a huge factor in jazz, but if you were to put those in the charts, the players could play them down easily. And jazz is doing so much reharmonization that the bass player and the pianist or whoever is using that idea of alternate keys or bass notes or whatever. So it's there, but it's not in the same way as like in pop music, which is kind of what I'm covering here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but in pop and rock, nobody put better, more sophisticated, more well-executed bass notes than Brian Wilson. Let's look at my Brian Wilson Beach Boys playlist, and you'll see a ton of his amazing songs that I analyze those bass notes and chord progressions. And what else are we doing when we're putting alternate bass notes? We're not just trying to be cool and putting something else in there. We're creating a melody in the bass. You could have a progression that's just C to G to C. So the bass moves. The bass can form a melody. This is not just random, but it's not a melody like the one you would sing. It just adds this subconscious layer of melody to it. And when you start exploring this world of alternate bass notes, you are going to find all kinds of interesting paths waiting for you for bass note possibilities once you get off that idea that you always have to hit the root. That being said, you could totally misuse this and abuse this where it wouldn't sound that great. So you got to trial, you got to get good at it, you got to practice, and it gets better. I've had some stuff where I'm like, maybe that was too many bass notes. I don't know. Now I'm going to go through each possible alternate bass note for major and minor chords, as well as dominant and half diminished. At the end of the video, I'm going to show you how I wrote a simple song and then spiced it up with alternate bass notes in the style of the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. I'm going to go based on consonants and popularity instead of going up chromatically. In other words, I'm going to show you each bass note that's the next most important one that you need to know. I'm not just going to go up C, C sharp, D. We'll hit all the notes and discuss whether they are a viable bass note, but I'm going to go by what actually sounds the most consonant or useful in a harmonic way. So it's a given in math that 1 is 1, and we don't think about it often enough, but without 1, you couldn't have any other numbers. And this stuff is actually all numbers. Every chord is a number. They're all just proportions. So yeah, we're not really taught what those proportions are. I do talk about that in my online Patreon, High Castle Conservatory, the musical science and the just intonation. But for now, let's just say that the most popular bass note is the root. We're in C. Let's play C. Let's move to F. Let's do an F. It's the most consonant sound. It's the most settled sound. So obviously there's a reason this is the most popular thing to do. but I feel like people don't even learn about some of the other stuff and how to make new bass notes. So this is a given in math. 1 equals 1. 1 is the building block of everything else. And in harmony, right, you can't have harmony without having relationship. The only reason you know that a harmony is there is because there's a relationship to the bass note or to the notes that are already there. So what is the next most popular or consonant alternate bass note? Let's look to the harmonic series. The first harmonic is 1, and then the second harmonic is an octave. It defines the entire universe. But the third harmonic is what we call the perfect fifth. So that perfect fifth is the next most important harmonic or alternate bass note. So in C, that would be C over G. It's the second most stable after the root. There's root. Here's C over G. It's a really nice sound. Brian Wilson used it very well in God Only Knows and many other tunes. So let's say we're in C major and I do a 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, 5, 1 progression. But I use this perfect fifth in an interesting way, or a way that helps with the resolution. So we go 1, 6, 4, 5. Now stay on C over G. Then resolve. Did you hear how it helped it suspend it a little? And it added a little bit of a drone there. You could do the same thing in minor. If we were in C minor, we could do 1, 6, 4, 5 in minor and do that same thing. 1, 6, 4, 5. Now 1, but hold the C minor over G. G7, C minor. For a dominant 7, you can do it anytime you want as well, to put the 5 in the bass or the perfect fifth in the bass. So let's take like an example of a real common progression. 1, 3 dominant to 6. So that would be C, E7, A minor. But there's an opportunity here for a bass note and to make a bass melody, because here would be the melody of that chord progression. So what could we do? C. Now we can walk down the C to B, and there's an E7. And it walk boom, 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 instead of boom, boom, boom. So we have C, E7 over B, A minor. So yeah, this perfect fifth in the bass is ripe for doing anything you want with it. It doesn't have a ton of personality. And in fact, I said before, it's the power chord of the universe. The power chord is 1 and 5. Sometimes on guitar you add another octave, but it's 2 notes. And the whole thing about a power chord is it does not define major, minor. I call that gender. Major or minors is kind of like the 2 genders of chord that you could have. So a power chord does not define itself, which allows a melody a lot of freedom to do whatever notes it sees fit. And the one other thing is, think about bass lines and how they use the root boom 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 boom, but the next most common note in any bass line is boom 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 boom, or if you take that G down an octave, boom 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 boom. I think we all recognize that. Boom 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 boom. So obviously the root is the most important, but the next most important is the perfect fifth in the bass. So C over G, or C minor over G, or C7 over G. The verse of God Only Knows starts on a D over A chord. I may not always love you. Such a cool way to start. Instead of, there would be, I may not always, but he does, I may not always love. The next most popular alternate bass note has got to be the major third. I said it has that sort of 80s sound and it wants to move to something. So if I was in C major, and it has that kind of 80s build-up sound. But it can be kind of unsettling to just, if I did 2, 5, 1 and C, instead of going back to C, it has a cool unresolved sound. Let's not forget, too, that the equal tempered major third is pretty out of tune, so maybe that gives it some of its unresolved sound. I bet if we tuned that down 14 cents, it would sound a little bit more settled and triangular. So let's give an example. If we're in C, there's that epic 80s walk down. So if the chord progression is C, G, A minor, in the 80s it would be C, G over B, which is the major third to A minor. A good one that comes to mind for teaching major thirds would be The Piano Man, and it takes this walking bass line. And do you think that's the chords he's doing? No. So check it out. C to G over B, so that's a major third in the bass. This is a strange one because usually the next chord is A minor, like in that epic 80s progression above. Billy Joel did an interesting thing here, and he did a kind of like an A minor, but he raised the fifth, so it actually makes it an F major over A. So it does two of those chords in a row with major thirds. Here. And then a C over G, we already went over that, with a perfect fifth on the bass. Then 4, C over E, the major third in the bass, 2/5, 2 dominant. So one more time. C, G with major 3 in the bass, F with major 3 in the bass, C with perfect fifth in the bass, 4, 1 over the major third, 2 dominant, 1. As far as those generic walking melody, that chord progression is not quite what you expect it to be. I know we've all heard it a million times, and I could go the rest of my life and never ever hear that song again, and I would be totally okay with it. But that's actually pretty cool, and it doesn't get quite the props that it deserves for that double... That sounds like an air supply chord change. So I know people were doing it. But it also puts a melody in that bass. The bass needs something to do, you know? You can't just keep saying, different note names and think he's going to come up with a good bass line. The next most important bass note, or alternate bass note, would be the dominant 7 or the minor 7. So if we have a C major, that would be this dominant 7, but instead of it voiced up here, we're going to voice it down here. So this would be C with C in the bass. Now listen to this sound, C with B flat in the bass. Anyway, it has a really cool sound. Look at the verse progression for God Only Knows and just wait for B over A. Instead of B over B, B over A. So it goes, I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you. Now listen to it without the slash chord. I'll just do B over B. I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above. Instead of stars above you. One of Brian Wilson's greatest songs, Surf's Up, uses an amazing D major with C in the bass, or D7 over C, however you want to call it. I call it D over C if I don't want the chord to be playing the dominant 7. I'm content with the dominant 7 to be in the bass. So to me, that's D over C, not D7 over C. So Brian Wilson's greatest song, Surf's Up, which I have a huge examination video of, you should check out, uses this D over C in an amazing way. Here. And again here, A over G. D over A. Huh? So that is a very underused chord, is putting that dominant 7 or that minor 7 in the bass of a major chord. You can really come up with some cool, even some cliche type of stuff that you need to know, like C, now C over B flat, now F over A, the major third in the bass, A flat, C over G, D over F sharp, F, C over E, D, G, C. You can also use it over a minor chord, Wind Chimes from Smile, Beach Boys' Smile, as based on a D minor 7 chord with C in the bass. Instead of... He goes, nope, this. And it goes D minor over C. And that bass note, talk about a weird bass line, it's just a G7, but he's like, why can't the bass have a little melody to walk up to 9? Sounds way more dissonant like that, but listen how boring it is if I don't do that. Listen to bass low. And that's walking from the root up to the major 2 or the 9 chromatically. So you can use a dominant 7 note or the minor 7 over a major chord or a minor chord or even a minor 7 flat 5, D minor 7 flat 5 with C in the bass instead of D in the bass. So yeah, use it. How about minor 3 in the bass? Here we get into a little bit of semantics. So a minor chord, let's say we have C minor, obviously over a major chord, we're not going to put that in the bass unless you're just trying to be a jerk or make some really horrible sound. Would you call that a C major over E flat? Okay, but minor chords, you can put the minor 3rd in the bass, and it's a different sound. And some of it is semantics, and let me tell you why. Because this is very close, this C minor over E flat to an E flat 6 chord. The only note that's missing is a B flat, but I'll play them both and listen. Do they sound pretty similar to you? So yeah, when you're examining a chord progression, if I found a C minor with an E flat in the bass, I'd be asking myself, is it a C minor over E flat or is it an E flat 6? Only difference is this one note. There's a C minor over E flat. Here's an E flat 6. But in a progression, they sound very similar. Watch. E flat 6. Let's pretend we're in E flat. Let's go to 5, B flat 7. Now I'm going to go back to E flat 6, but just do that C minor over E flat. It's the same sound. So if we're in major like that, I'm going to call that E flat 6. But if he happened to be in C minor and we went C minor, G7 over D, now C minor over E flat, now G over F, then minor 7 in the bass, C minor over G, the perfect 5th in the bass, G7 over B, the major 3rd in the bass, C minor. One more time, let's do that. So yeah, whether when you're analyzing a chord you call something C minor over E flat or E flat 6, if it truly doesn't have that note, it's a C minor over E flat. But if it's functioning in the key of E flat, I think you have to call that E flat 6. Judgment call, but I think it's something you'll get better at. This is not a clear one. Obviously, you could have a minor 3rd in the bass of a minor 7 flat 5 chord. So if we had D minor 7 flat 5 and put the minor 3rd in the chord, but what do you know? More semantics. That's the same exact notes as F minor 6. So D minor 7 over F and F minor 6 have the exact same notes. And again, what you're going to name it is going to be based on which key you're in, which one makes it seem like the progression fits better. So if you have to use a slash chord to maintain the key that you're in, then do it. Next most important bass note will probably be the perfect 4th. And you can use this over major chords even, not really as much dominant 7 chords, and on minor chords, the perfect 4th is one of the best bass notes you could do, and we'll explain why. So there is a problem with major chords, right? C major is spelled C-E-G, and a perfect 4th is, it's a tension. That's a lot of notes really close. However, if you take that perfect fourth and offset it by at least an octave or even 2 octaves, it's really not fighting anymore up here. It's creating this different thing. Now this chord is not used that often. And it's an interesting chord because look what it is. C, E, G, which would be C major over F. But it's almost every note of F major 9 except the major third. And if you know what a third does, it defines whether it's major or minor. So this is truly a C major over F. Happens to be part of a signature Steely Dan chord progression that they use that I always found really perplexing when I'd hear, and literally, even though I have a pretty good ear for music, it would come by and I'd be like, man, what was that? Steely Dan has this way of doing those slash chords that I just showed you, which is a major chord with the perfect fourth in the bass. And they do 4 of them in a row that are first a whole step apart, so A over D to G over C. It's really crazy, but yeah, they have a song called Josie, which uses it right. The verse is like, we're gonna break out the hats and hooters when Josie comes home. Here it comes. We're gonna rev up the motor scooters when Josie comes home to stay. We're gonna mix in the street, break all the laws and break. So yeah, really weird sound, honestly, very mystical sound, this whole thing. And it just falls back into that E minor. That chord, A major over D, is very similar to a D major 9 chord with a major 7, but it has no 3, so you just can't call it that. Now, minor chord does not have the same issues of tension on a perfect fourth because the minor third is lower. So if we're in C, there's no clash because C minor, see, there's space. And especially if you put that down, you take the sound of a C minor. Now listen to the sound if I put F in the bass, but keep the C minor. That's used a lot. C minor 7 even, watch. There's C minor in the bass, C in the bass. F in the bass, C minor 7 over F. The perfect fourth is absolute gold on minor chords, even in the melody. The melody loves a fourth in a minor chord, and the bass note loves to be a fourth in the minor chord. Major chord, it's a little trickier. You have to use that Steely Dan trick and take out that third. But wouldn't it be nice? Pre-chorus uses a nice version of that. It goes D minor 7 over A, perfect fifth in the bass, to C minor 7 over F. The part that goes, you know it's gonna make it that much better when we can say goodnight and stay together. But just those first 2 chords, D minor 7 over A. You know it's gonna make it that much better when we can say goodnight and stand together. Also, let's take the verse of Surf's Up, which is 2 amazing chords with 2 amazing bass notes. You have G minor 7 over D. It's the perfect fifth in the bass. To D minor 7 over G. That's the perfect fourth in the bass. So G minor 7 with perfect fifth in the bass. G minor 7 over D. To D minor 7 with the perfect fourth in the bass. G. If I had D, it'd be that. But I have G and it adds all this color. So 11 or perfect fourth is a great note on minor chords. Even if you're on the melody, you start on there, minor 7 flat 5 chord, same thing. You can use the perfect fourth in the bass. So if we had a C minor 7 flat 5, I could do F in the bass. Sounds great. Wants to resolve to B flat minor. So you could write this as C minor 7 flat 5 over F. You could also call that F 7 flat 9 sus, because this major third has gone up here. That's exactly the same chord. I keep saying there's a lot of semantics. You can call chords different things. Call this an F7 flat 9 sus or C minor 7 flat 5 over F. Now the tritone, oh my gosh. Okay, I can't get into a whole lesson about flat 5 substitution or tritone substitution. Suffice it to say, any dominant chord, you can change the bass note to be a tritone away, and it still has a harmonic function. Really what it does is it turns it into a bunch of really cool dominant notes. There's a reason for that, and if you ever thought about the philosophical principle of a circle, that an octave is a circle, and the dividing point halfway through, the polar opposite of the principle, which is 1, or the first harmonic, is -1, which is halfway across the circle. What do you know that exactly halfway across the circle is our most dissonant note? So harmony strives to how do we reharmonize that note, and so many cool melodies, that note is used to great effect. Anyway, so you can take a dominant chord and add a tritone in the bass. So if we're in C7, I could just say, no, we're doing C7 over F sharp. Or you could do a F sharp 7 and leave C in the bass. You can swap them either way. Let me show you a really simple chord progression. We'd have C, A minor, D minor 7. Usually we would just go G7. But here, you're going to hear a weird chord change because I'm going to use that tritone sub. I'm going to say, I don't want the G because I know there's a rule that says I can take a dominant chord and put a tritone in the bass. And then you get this cool thing, D minor 7. I love that chord. You have to use it right. But instead of G7 over C sharp, you could also do C sharp 7 over G. Let's try that. All I'm doing is swapping those. That is cool because that wants to go. Does that make sense? Anytime you have a dominant chord, you have an option of playing a note that's a flat 5th higher or lower because it's the same distance. But the reason this is known as the most dissonant interval is it cuts the musical universe or the musical circle of the octave in half exactly. So the polar opposite of 1 is going to be that, you know, the polar opposite of summer is winter. It's the opposite thing. And especially since the harmonic series tells us that the most important thing is the octave, then the perfect 5th. How does this vibe with perfect 5th? There could not be a more dissonant note than this tritone, but that's also the reason why you can just invert stuff along that axis, and it actually flips it to be of use in its own harmony. So, major 7 in the bass, pretty rare, but pretty cool. The only time I've ever really seen it is Brian Wilson on Smile on a song called Holidays. It's like C to A minor. It's really simple, and the melody's like... But instead of just doing your typical doo-wop C to A minor, he does B in the bass. So it's a major 7. And major 7 is a beautiful tension, right? Because it's a half step away from the root, but it's also separated by an octave. So if we invert that whole thing that the major 7 needs to be on top of a chord, and we do it, there's C, C over B. So I wouldn't call that C major 7 over B. For clarity, I would call it C major over B because I don't want any of the chord players playing that major 7. So instead of C to A minor, we have C over B to A minor. Really cool. I guess by the same token, you could take a C minor chord and put a minor major 7, but in the bass. Let's say we had C minor to G7, and then I wanted to make it a C minor major 7. I can put that in the bass. It's going to be really tense, but it's a possibility. So major 7, it's worth a shot. Major 2 or 9 in the bass. If we're in C, that's D. You can totally use 2 or 9 anytime you want. You just got to be aware you might be making other chords. So if I have C major and I do D, that's pretty close to a D9 sus, right? It's not exactly. It's still C over D, but it's also pretty close to D9 sus, right? So that's another issue of semantics. If we have a minor chord, Someone might think of that as a D7 flat 9 sus instead of just C minor over D, but again, I hate to keep using the word semantics. You can use the major 2 or the 9 in the bass at will, but just be aware you might be making some other more obvious chord than the chord you think you're making. Flat 6 in the bass. You pretty much make a different chord if you do that. So if we have C major and I put A flat in the bass, that's an A flat major 7 with a sharp 5. So it really just changes the chord, so you can't really do it without changing the chord. C minor, same thing. If I put an A flat in the bass, you get an A flat major 7. It's really all about how you think about it, but I would never call a chord a C minor over A flat. It's an A flat major 7. Major 6 in the bass. You really can't have a major 6 in the bass. Let me tell you why. Same reason. It changes the chord. So if we have C major and I put A, look what's happened. We've now made an A minor 7 chord. I wouldn't call this C over A. Just no, it would be called A minor 7. Now for minor, you would have, that just becomes an A minor 7 flat 5. Again, you change the chord completely. So you're not keeping any type of C. So really there is no such thing as a 6 in the bass unless you just want to be changing the chord. Flat 9 in the bass, I mean, it's a tension. You can use it at will, especially on a dominant chord, because a dominant chord often has a flat 9 as an extension, which is like a flat 2 or a minor second, and it's like Jaws. But so if we're in C7, it's a big tension to do it, but in minor, I don't know if it would work as well. C minor over C sharp or D flat. You can do it if you want that tension, but it's not very common. So I don't even see, if you were going to say C7 flat 9 over D flat, you almost could just call it a D flat diminished chord, but yeah, not super common to have a straight up flat 9 or flat 2 in the bass. Yeah, and there's some that you just can't do really at all. You can't do a minor 3 over a major chord. It's just not a chord. I mean, if you like that sound, use it, but what about diminished chords? C diminished. Remember, a diminished is very close to a dominant chord. So this is very close to an F7 chord, and you go up a minor third, very close to an A flat 7 chord, a B7 chord, or a D7 chord. So really, you can use any of those related. So all you need to do to find the roots are go up a whole step from any tone and do a dominant here. So there's C, we're going to go to D, there's D7 flat 9, F, F7 flat 9, A flat 7 flat 9, and B7 flat 9. You could also just do the note C. What about augmented chords? Well, if you're in C, you could do C, E, or G sharp. You could probably also do over G, the 5. But remember that usually in jazz, you get it with a dominant 7. So you get like a C7 sharp 5. So in which case you would use any bass note you might use over a C7 chord. To better explore this deep well of knowledge about alternate bass notes and how to apply them to your own compositions, I highly suggest you study the master, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. I have 4 videos on my page that you should check out. You can look at my playlist page on Beach Boys and check out the analysis I do for God Only Knows, Surf's Up, Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder, and Wonderful for some amazing lessons on songs that clearly use alternate bass notes in an extremely sophisticated way. I'm not sure anyone has used them better than Brian has. I won't get into it here since I have videos on all of it, but just real quickly, the basic chords to God Only Knows, and just listen to all these alternate bass notes, even if you don't understand them. D over A, which is a perfect fifth of D in the bass. I may not. B minor 6, F sharp minor 7, B over A, E over B, C diminished 7, E over B, B flat minor 7 flat 5, A, E over G sharp, F sharp minor. Yeah, check out that video. It's a wild ride, and it takes a while to really break down all of that. Then you have songs like Surf's Up, like I went over a little earlier. G minor 7 over D. to D minor 7 over G. And then B flat major 9, G minor 7, F over C, C7, D over C, G over D, A over G, D over A. Are you sleeping? Absolute mastery of alternate bass notes. Now, the last thing I want to show you is a song I wrote, and I wrote it as a simple chord change, and then I went back and revised my song and decided to add some more sophisticated bass notes, and the composition really took on more personality. This is a ballad that's kind of in a Pet Sounds type of style. I'm going to play you the simple chords, and then I'm going to play you the alternate bass notes, and you can see how it evolved. And it wasn't just alternate bass notes. I changed a few chords as well, but it came out of the bass notes once I saw what the pattern it was doing was. So this is from a song called At Least We Have Today, in my side project, now defunct, Stratosphere. This was the final song on the Quadrupus album. So it was a simple song like this, and it's kind of funny we did a sing-song because we were mostly an instrumental prog band, but I kept pushing in my Beach Boys song, so not sure it even fit on the record, honestly, but it's a good song. So in the simple form, it's mostly just 1s and 2s and 5s in C. If in this world the one for me is you, my time in this world is fleeting all the while. So pretty simple, but let's take it again, and it goes twice as long as that, but I'm going to take it with the different bass notes and slightly different chords, and I want you to hear how it changed and how the bass adds a personality to it that it did not have. So it would go with the new chords and bass notes. If in this world the one for me is you, my time in this world is fleeting all the while. Soon I'll separate the sorrow from the pain. Tomorrow's nice, but how about today? So if I'm gone tomorrow, then at least we'd have today. So yeah, you can see how much better that song got with adding Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and there's really no end to this exploration of bass notes. So I suggest to all you composers out there, do your simple version of the song, come up with the basic chords, and we're not just trying to make it more complex. We're trying to make it something the ear grabs onto, or something more original, or something that hasn't been done. So it takes a lot of experimentation with these alternate bass notes before you get a good feel for how you actually use them. But sky is the limit, and I suggest you study songs where they did this a lot. And the Pet Sounds album is probably the best place you can go to learn alternate bass notes. So thanks for watching, and see you next time. Thanks a lot for watching this video and taking an interest in my channel. Please help me reach a larger audience by hitting subscribe below and ringing the notification bell. Check out my video playlist page to find the categories that most interest you. Leave me a super thanks here on YouTube, and even better, come join my Patreon. Please consider buying music for my original projects I.S.S. and High Castle Teleorchestra. Also, don't forget to sign up for my email list on the front page of timsmolens.com. You can find information about all of those things in the description below. Thanks again.